Dark Route. Chapter 1. The Tragedy That Changed Everything. In a small, cozy house on the outskirts of the city, joy and laughter filled the air. Young couple Jack and Emma Wilson were happy with their 5-year-old son Lucas. His ringing laughter filled the house, and his cheerful energy seemed inexhaustible. Each day brought new adventures and discoveries. Jack worked as an architect, and Emma was a school teacher. Their lives were simple but filled with love and happiness. However, one unfortunate day their world collapsed. Lucas began to complain of abdominal pain that grew increasingly severe. Jack and Emma immediately took him to the hospital. There, doctors conducted a series of tests and discovered that the boy had a rare kidney disease. The only chance for salvation was an urgent transplant. The doctors explained that finding a donor would be extremely difficult and the operation would require enormous costs. The Wilson family could not afford such an expensive operation. They began seeking help from charitable organizations and asking for assistance from everyone they knew, but time was relentlessly running out. Lucas's condition worsened with each passing day. Several months passed, and one morning Jack and Emma discovered that their son was no longer breathing. The pain of loss was unbearable. They had lost the most precious thing they had, and it destroyed them from the inside. Lucas's funeral was held in an atmosphere of deep grief. Their small house was no longer filled with laughter, and their lives were plunged into darkness and despair. After Lucas's death, Jack and Emma could no longer live as they once did. Their world had shattered, and they felt that no one understood their suffering. The pain of losing their son overshadowed all their bright memories, and they began searching for ways to bring justice. Long nights spent in conversations and tears led them to a shocking decision. They wanted to find those responsible for their misfortune. Chapter 2. The Wave of Horror. The city lived in fear. Taxi drivers who still remained at their posts tried to avoid long trips in dangerous areas. Every week the news reported new victims. Taxi drivers became targets for unknown criminals who sedated them and harvested their kidneys. Panic grew, and the number of taxi drivers dwindled each day. Some feared becoming a victim, while others had already fallen prey. Local news portals dubbed them the night surgeons. Every day, new articles appeared about how taxi drivers were afraid to go on their shifts. People began choosing other means of transportation, fearing for their safety. The city, once calm and peaceful, was now enveloped in an atmosphere of fear and distrust. But behind this wave of horror lay another story. Detective Michael Howard, who had been assigned to the case, had his own reasons for fighting for justice. Several years ago, his own son had died from a gangster's bullet. This tragic event led Michael to join the police force, where he vowed to protect the innocent and fight lawlessness. Chapter 3. The Beginning of the Investigation. Detective Michael Howard began the investigation, examining every detail, every piece of evidence. But clues were scarce, and the criminals acted very cautiously. He conducted numerous interrogations, studied surveillance footage, but all of it yielded no significant results. The criminals were always one step ahead, and it frustrated him. However, Michael was not going to give up. He understood that the only way to catch the criminals was to infiltrate the world of taxi drivers and become part of this dangerous world. He decided to disguise himself in civilian clothes and get a job as a taxi driver in one of the city's taxi companies. It was a risky decision, but he had no other choice. Michael began preparing for the operation, studying the behavior of taxi drivers and the peculiarities of their work. He made new acquaintances and began to understand how much the taxi drivers feared the night surgeons. Each evening, as he went on shift, he felt the tension and fear in the air. But he knew he had to continue in order to catch the criminals and stop the horror. Chapter 4. Infiltrating the Taxi Company. Disguised in civilian clothes, Michael got a job as a taxi driver in one of the city's taxi companies. Every day he went out on orders, hoping to encounter the night surgeons. He knew it wouldn't be easy and prepared for long nights filled with dangers and uncertainties. Meeting different passengers, he tried to stay vigilant and ready for any turn of events. Michael became part of the taxi driver's world, made new acquaintances, and began to understand how much the taxi drivers feared the night surgeons. During his work, Michael noticed that the couple Tom had mentioned often ordered taxis on certain days of the week and always at the same time. This was an important lead that could bring him to the criminals. One late evening, Michael received an order from that very couple. It was a long route leading to the outskirts of the city. Michael felt the growing tension and decided to follow his intuition. He prepared carefully, hiding a recorder and a small camera in the car. Chapter 5. The night when everything was revealed. When the couple got into the taxi, they were unusually quiet. Michael tried to keep up the conversation, but received only short answers. They asked to turn onto a secluded road, and Michael realized that this was the moment of truth. When the car stopped on the deserted road, Michael felt his heart beat faster. He noticed the man taking a syringe out of his pocket. Michael pretended to check the navigator, but in reality, activated the recording on his phone. Suddenly, the man leaned forward sharply, trying to inject the syringe into Michael's neck. The detective reacted instantly, twisting out of the grasp and knocking the syringe out of the attacker's hand. A struggle ensued, in which Michael proved stronger. He managed to subdue the man and detain him along with the woman. Chapter 6. The Unveiling and Consequences. When Jack and Emma were arrested, their motives and story became known to the entire city. It soon emerged that the harvested kidneys were being anonymously sent to local clinics as charitable donations. Jack and Emma hoped that by doing so, they could numb their emotional pain by helping other people in need of kidneys, especially those who could not afford expensive operations. Michael met with Jack and Emma in the jail cell. They told him about their tragedy and how the loss of their son led them to these horrific acts. They didn't seek excuses, but their story evoked Michael's sympathy. He understood their pain, as he had experienced something similar himself. Michael shared his story with them. His son had died from a gangster's bullet, and after that tragedy, his wife couldn't bear the grief and left him. Michael became a police officer to protect the peaceful population and fight lawlessness. He admitted that he could have become a vigilante and taken the law into his own hands, but he chose a different path. "There's always a choice," Michael said. "You can help people purely or do it, carrying the suffering and blood of the innocent. I chose the law because I wanted others not to suffer as I did." Jack and Emma listened silently. They realized that their path had led to even more suffering, and now they had to accept the consequences of their actions. Their eyes were filled with pain and remorse. They understood that in trying to help others, they had become the cause of someone else's suffering. The story of the night surgeons ended, but it left a deep mark on the hearts of those who learned about it. It was a story of pain and loss, of justice and revenge, of the choices that make us who we are. Michael continued his work, knowing that the fight for justice is an ongoing process requiring courage and compassion. Local clinics, having received the anonymous kidneys, began performing free operations for those who couldn't afford them. Jack and Emma's story became known, and people started discussing how far one could go in trying to help others. The city, which had been engulfed in fear, now faced the question of how to deal with the aftermath of this horror. For Michael, this story became a reminder of his own past and that every criminal is a person with a story. He continued his work, but now he understood that behind every tragedy lies something more than just a crime. His own loss and fight for justice continued to motivate him to fight lawlessness. The end. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you for your attention.